Kadeem. So I think the best way to really go into the project itself is the genesis and the backstory and the problems. And I think we mentioned some problems, but I think from my perspective, when I joined crypto 5 years ago, I slowly but surely, as you get over the initial, everything's you're like a kid in a toy shop or a candy store. Once you really start to drill down and educate yourself on how these things are working, consensus, etc., I realized, 2 or 3 years ago that there's a sort of siloed element within the DNA of the entire design of how this is all built. And really, you get a lot of layer ones that are great and they're doing great things. And layer twos, of course, recently we've had great waves with Arbitrum, which we're in discussions with. However, they're sort of a lot of these new projects and new layer ones, they promise speed as one of the things of why they need to be there. And then there's no real interoperability aspect to them. And then you have foundations that raise large amounts of money, and then they sort of, once they build a land plot, if you consider a layer one as a plot of land, you kind of then get a whole array of siloed protocols that build on top, your tenants, your buildings that you're building on top of your land plot. And really what happens is, or what's happened is, that you do get, although interoperability is huge now and there are protocols and technology tools that are dealing with this, but it's not completely mature yet, and it really impacts how DeFi is progressing. So you've got this, siloed ecosystem, and a lot of these ecosystems, and then the businesses that are building on top of each layer one or layer two, are really reliant on the users of that particular ecosystem, and that creates a number of problems. One of the problems that it creates is it's siloed and fragmented liquidity, which multi-chain integrations are expensive or resource intensive for protocols to then scale. And then you have the whole thing about security, especially if your ground plot has not been built to talk to other, protocols or layer ones. And then really what you get, and what we saw, really, myself and Slava in particular, was that not only the omni-chain problem is there, but there's also an intra-chain problem within the same environment or the same layer one or the layer two, which basically two dApps within DeFi are not optimizing liquidity. So if I give you an example, you have a DEX on AVAX, Trader Joe, one of our partners. Although they've gone multi-chain recently, but just take a DEX that's confined to one layer one. Their liquidity providers, because to earn in DeFi, you need to provide liquidity. So LPs on that DEX, they get their LP token, and that's it. That's where the story ends. And they earn, obviously, a reward on that LP token based on the value of the governance token that's being issued. But what that leads to is this asset now in the hands of a user is not being optimized, and you lose capital efficiency from a user perspective, and then from a protocol perspective, you lose, or the rates of liquidity retention there are lower. Whereas in an ideal world, you want to get your LP token, which is an asset-backed, yield-bearing asset, and in TradFi, you could, if you get a bond, for example, a government bond or a treasury bond or a corporate bond, highly liquid and valuable, you can take that and you can actually obtain financing against it, or you can do certain things with it within the TradFi construct. So in what we saw in DeFi in particular was that there was a limited utility in secondary, tertiary utility, which then creates capital inefficiencies and compounded by siloed liquidity. So there's a lot of stuck, frustrated capital, and then there's a lack of utility on top. And then to compound, or to put the cherry on top of the cake, although I'm not quite sure it's a cake in this case, really there's no scalable infrastructure or tooling, wholesome combined tooling infrastructure that allows this to remedy itself. Although some initiatives like Layer Zero and some others are doing brilliant jobs, but we'll come on to why we've built Entangle the way we've built it. But yeah, these are the core problems that we foresaw in the space, Kadeem, and the rest of the community, and really that's what Entangle is aiming to address.